Welcome to the Stories of School Leadership podcast, the podcast where we elevate the voices of and create connections between inspirational leaders from the UK and around the world. I'm Emma Lurie, and thank you for joining me as I share these journeys, inspirations and stories of education, leadership and life. In this episode, I'm joined by Bob Benson, who is a current head teacher, and we talk about being a male leader in an all-girls school, supporting pupils who are in receipt of Pupil Premium. We think about how males in leadership can champion and elevate the voices of women in leadership. And we talk about a way to find balance in the current stresses of the educational climate. So I hope you really enjoy this episode. Let's get going. Good morning, Bob. It's so lovely to have you with me. Thank you. I don't know if people are listening, whether it be morning or afternoon, but there we go. It's morning for us.
Good morning, Emma. Good to see you.
Can you just tell us who you are, where you are in the world and what your role is?
Of course, yeah. My name's Bob Benson. I am head teacher at Dover Grammar School for Girls. So I'm in the southeast and have been here 7.5 years in this wonderful, amazing school.
That's a good start. There's somewhere that you're happy and you love. So what I always like to do, because I'm nosy, is ask people about their own school experience. So it'd be really great if you were happy to share with us just what school was like for you, what that experience was like, to get us started.
Absolutely. So yes, my school experience is probably very different to the school experience of students here. I went to private primary school, and then went on to a private secondary school. I went to Tunbridge School. Yes, so my experience is very, very different. I went to boarding school, and probably an amount of my thinking probably was influenced through that time. Obviously, huge opportunities. It was a great school, all sorts of things, but it certainly provided a number of thoughts for me that have threaded through my career to date.
Ooh, okay, well, as we go through, track back and tell us what those were, because lots of people do end up saying, actually, for positives, negatives, bit of both, sometimes their own school experience led them to make choices about going into education as a career and maybe going into leadership. So
yeah, I mean, there was one thing, I don't know whether it's worth talking about now. Being at a boarding school, you're in a kind of a bubble. It was a very positive bubble, but a kind of bubble. And I did spend a bit of time, went to a local church, and in there were students from every single school, and I felt a little bit strange, a little bit different, wasn't quite sure. And the welcome that I got was just amazing. Acceptance, all those kind of things. And it really kind of drew me to think, okay, let's look at education in a broader way. Let's look at the whole remit and see where I fit in and what I think is important, rather than just say, oh, well, this is the school I went to, so this is the school I want to work in, this is the school I want to be leadership in. Let's have a look at the broader experience.
Yeah, that's really interesting. But you said it was positive. The boarding element was positive for you?
It was really positive, actually. Yeah. I mean, I'm an only child, so going to a boarding school where you have lots of friends, all sorts of things going on, all sorts of sports and activities. It was really, really positive. I think it's quite formative, those years, in terms of the way you think. But the opportunities I got were just amazing. I mean, it was in the 80s, so the schooling was very, very different then to where it is now. Yes, I can still remember. I mean, I don't know what it's appropriate to say, but I can still remember taking my own school trip when I was in year 12. And I was,
How did that work?
I was given the train ticket, and I took a whole load of younger students, and we went up to London, and then we went down to...
How old were you?
Pardon?
How old were you?
16, 17, and I have to say, not the most responsible student. You're really, really not. I can remember the fun we had of jumping on and off trains, going through the underground in London. Have we lost somebody? Oh no, I mean, it's just inconceivable now. But the responsibility that we had was amazing. Gosh, so different now.
I guess but you learn from that, don't you? And there's a lot out there around parenting styles, I suppose, in the same way of school leadership and how protective we are or need to be, and whether those decisions that we're making are right or wrong, because I mean, that absolutely sounds terrifying. However, you will have learned a lot from that, and actually it's probably quite supportive of the teachers that Bob's taking all the kids today to London.
Yeah, I mean, it was
Great. Why don't we reinstate that? Good idea.
it was, yeah, fascinating. I mean, we went to a place, and there, once we got there, down in the southwest, there was all sorts of activities put on and stuff. So it wasn't the whole time, but it was just getting there and getting back again.
Yeah.
But I think that was, yeah, I don't think that was particularly unusual.
Do you think that was then your first step into teaching?
I think not. No, at the time, it's the last thing I wanted to do. Both my parents were teachers. My mum taught at a local technical college. My dad was a head of biology at a local high school. And so there is no doubt I was not going to be a teacher. Absolutely.
Right. Well, what happened then?
Well, I went on to Exeter University, did mathematical statistics and operational research. Not very well. I still wasn't a great student, I've got to be honest.
But a great place to be. I'm also an Exeter alumni, so well done.
Fantastic university, so many great experiences, but maybe I should have attended lectures just a little bit more than I did. But there we go. So yes, and then after that, I decided that I needed to have a broader experience. So with a friend, we went traveling, essentially. And it was then that, particularly going through countries, third world countries where education was just so important. I can remember we spent a bit of time in the Philippines. Amazing country, just such a great experience. But we were looking at a kind of almost like a shanty town. And then at that time in the morning when students go to school, all these students would come out of these very small kind of huts, absolutely immaculate in their uniform. And you could tell there was this real, I don't know what you call it, real emphasis that education was the right thing. The way out of poverty, the way out of disadvantage, social mobility was so important because that was their way to success. And that really, if you consider the background I came from, that really, that year was so formative in changing my mind as to the power of education.
That's really fascinating, isn't it? Seeing those developing spaces, developing countries, those landscapes, and how, as you said, like that contrast, I guess, to what your experience and broadening your knowledge base of what it's like in different places. So did you come back then and decide, okay,
I did.
I'll go into education?
I would say I probably fell into teacher training because that was the thing to do. And I quite like the idea of the holidays. I mean, obviously that's changed a bit now, isn't it? Once you're in school leadership, the holidays aren't quite what you thought they would be. And of course it's what I knew. So I went into there wanting to go into probably into a technical college like my mum, but ended up going into secondary education as a maths teacher.
And were your family supportive of that?
Yes, yeah, they were
journey?
very supportive actually. I think perhaps more pleased than I was in some ways because they thought, oh, good, he's settled down, he's going to do something sensible, brilliant. But yes, and then going into education in Kent, and I've taught, I think it's 8 or 9 schools now, different ones, all sorts of high schools, grammar schools, bilateral schools, and some of the schools that I taught at, really looking at students for whom school was the safe place. It was the place where they were going to achieve, but also that maybe there was an opportunity for me in education. Maybe actually I wasn't just going to be a teacher all my life. Maybe maybe I could see opportunities where actually I could make a difference. Yes, so.
And do you mean broader difference in terms of the idea of stepping into leadership where your zone of influence expands from making a difference in your classroom, I guess, to what it looks like when you work in a different way leading staff?
Yes, yeah, I think so. I think obviously when you're a class teacher, you have a really great influence on the students you teach and your form, and you get to know those students. But you've then got the whole thing of the provision being correct, all those kind of things. And you think, well, maybe I could take on this responsibility, or ensuring that behavior works not just for you but for your whole department. or for your whole area, and you're thinking, well, you know, I could, you know, my class is relatively well behaved, you know, I'm getting that respect. Could I have that influence to help others? And you get new people coming to teach, and you think, well, you know, could I be the person that could actually have a bit more influence in supporting them, in helping them? Yes, so yeah, I think it certainly wasn't an intention of mine to be ambitious. Had you talked to me in my first few years of teaching, I would have probably said, great, it's a good opportunity, got the holidays, and hopefully I can, you know, I can work abroad soon, which is what I wanted to do. But certainly that kind of element of leadership kind of creeps up on you. I would say sometimes by surprise. Sometimes, you know, people recognize things in you first before you recognize it in yourself. And so there were a few stories like that.
So, and I was, when you were talking about your, I guess you taking on that role and what sounded like maybe becoming a sort of mentor to others and inspiration to others, were there people in those early phases of your career that influenced you? Was some of that family? Were there other positive, inspirational influences?
So I went from my first school, did 4 years of my first school in Medway, and then I went out to an international school. The school in Medway was huge. The international school, I didn't know quite what I was going into. And I realised there were only 40 students in the secondary school when I got there.
Where was it?
Pardon? It was in Thailand, Garden International School in Rayong, which has since flourished and is going on from strength to strength. But yes, so within a year of being there, I was then asked onto the leadership team of the school. And of course, it's a small school, but you then begin to think as a leader. And I remember Rob McGraw, he was the head at the time. I remember talking about something, and he stopped me and he said, "You know what, Bob? You could be a head teacher one day." I never thought about it, never ever thought about it. And I suddenly thought, gosh, maybe he's seen something in me that I wouldn't necessarily see in myself. You know, I'd be much more keen on enjoying myself in the maths classroom and you know, being part of the staff plays and stuff like that. You know, being you know, just that whole kind of school experience, enjoying the trips, which, you know, in international schools are just amazing. But you then get to think of, well, maybe this is a path for my life that I hadn't thought about. And so yeah, and obviously having an experience of leadership before you're 30, obviously gets you beginning to think in your kind of whole career of, you know, where is this leading? Where am I going to? What am I going to put in place in my career? What, you know, mentors, what training am I going to put in place?
How can you get there? I've spoken to a few people who have cited the opportunities that come about when you're in a smaller school, because naturally there's less people to take those roles on and things get spread about, and you can be quite early in your career and thrown into doing something, because that's, you know, that's just the way. So I hear a lot of people who've gone from small school has given them this really real breadth of experience, I guess, in the early leadership. So what did you do next, and how did that stepping stone to headship come about?
So I then came back to this country, and then did a number of the kind of standard thing, head of department. I then stepped into an assistant headship role, deputy head and then head, but kind of moving around each time. And many people will often get promoted in their own school, but actually moving from school to school, what it meant is I saw some great schools functioning, but everyone did it differently. So you'd see something happening in one school, and then the next school said, "No, you can't do that." And you go, "Well, it's strange, because I've just seen it working at the school next door. I wonder if we could give it a go." You know, and you take on those responsibilities. My first assistant headship job was all within that training. You know, it was training, staff training, it was teacher training. And so you spend a lot of time kind of mentoring, learning the kind of emotional intelligence of, oh, wait a minute, this person isn't right today. You know, I'm not asking the right questions. How do I just take a step back and say, okay, this isn't going, what's up? You know, the people who are suddenly upset about something at home, or there's something that, you know, your support, what you think you're going to do that day suddenly becomes very different. You know, you want to talk about pedagogy, you want to talk about behavior in the classroom, you end up talking about, okay, you know, how can we support you? to get through the next 2 weeks because of this, disaster that's happened at home or whatever.
Yeah, you're right. It's it's those people skills that I guess you have to learn, don't you? And there are lots of great programs out there now that you can go on to learn some of the research behind that, but ultimately some of that is learn as you go, and you're working with people, aren't you, Tom? So you never quite know what you're stepping into. Like you said, you can expect, right, today here's my to-do list, and then minutes later it's out the window.
And it's about being a leader as well, isn't it? It's about seeing what's in front of you. You've got to lead the people from where they are. So you've got to obviously lead the students, recognise them in their individual needs, but also with staff and support staff, just recognising those and trying to adapt daily for them and support them. Because essentially you're looking as a leader, the best thing is to have loyalty, isn't it? Staff will do things for you. Why? Because it's you. Do they agree with you? Hopefully they do, and they're enthusiastic and great because of that. But even if they don't, they think, well, if Bob said it, I might go with that. So that sense of loyalty and leadership, developing that loyalty is so important, isn't it? Yeah. And I know you've said that from some of the podcasts that I've listened to. You've got that group, that senior leadership team that you've worked with, and you've got that really good relationship where you're very loyal to one another, you support one another. That is so important.
Yeah, I think especially when things are difficult, to keep and to celebrate the highs, but when things are tough, knowing that you have a group of people around you really makes it manageable, doesn't it? Or as manageable as it can be. So you said at the start you've been at your current school for a good chunk of time, clearly over the pandemic and probably some other challenging times. It would be really great to hear about some of the challenges that you have faced in your current role, and then we'll go on to all the great stuff as well.
Yes, I think many people would talk about the pandemic. I think early in my headship, we had the flood. So there was, I don't know, thousands of gallons pouring through the main one day. And suddenly you've got a, what do we call it during COVID? Pivot. From what you're thinking you're doing, suddenly you're looking a different direction. Okay, what's going to happen? This was pre-teaching online and all that. What am I going to do? And so, yes, the great flood when I can remember sitting in my office trying to work out what was going to happen, which year groups could be in school. And one of the contractors came in and saw some water coming through into my office and said, sorry, you're out of here and I need to lock the door. And I think, okay, I don't even know how to communicate with people now. I don't even know where I'm going to be sitting. I don't know what, it's that kind of emergency. And when, as you say, the team is so important, isn't it? That you work together as a team, you understand how you're working. And particularly through COVID, I think the team that I had here were absolutely exceptional, working together. When a new piece of government guidance came out and you realise suddenly things were going to have to change overnight, that you put in that time together. And you'd really be doing it for each other, wouldn't you? Because we want to make the very best of this. We want to make sure we get the very best for the students. We're going to work together in these difficult times. So yes, the flood. There was the time when the heating broke down in I think it was November, December. That was a great time. One or two other things. I think it's one of the joys of having an older building. There's some great things about having an older building. But when you have an older building, there are also some challenges that go with it. Yeah.
Every school has a leaky roof, I think. If I don't think I've ever met a school without a leaky roof. Even the new buildings usually have some sort of leaky roof. It's just part of it, isn't it? Part of what you need to have if you're going to be a school leader is a leaky roof. I'm really interested as well in, you, and I don't know what your other schools were, but currently you are head of a school for girls. And how is that being a male? Is that something you at the start were kind of conscious of? And as I said, maybe you worked in other schools that were single sex, but I'm kind of interested in that and your thought processes and how that maybe affects decisions or things you're more aware of because of it, I guess, because it's an interesting idea.
It's a really, really interesting one. I remember when I was looking at applying for headships, and actually when I was looking at applying for any leadership role, people would say, well, do you want to work at a single sex boys school or girls school? And I've always said, I just want to work at the best school there is. I don't mind. So from my perspective, I had already worked at 2 single sex girls schools and boys schools and mixed. So I'd because, as I said, I've moved around to a number of roles. I've done that, so I knew that wouldn't be a concern for me. But also within a girls' school, you want to have that role model that students can follow. And it's really important to have those role models in school of female leadership. So I am the only male member of my leadership team.
Okay.
Many of the members of staff, I can't remember the proportion, are female working in a girls' school. So there are lots of those role models. But I do also think it's important to have men in leadership in girls' schools. So you've got that difference. You've got that the different ways of thinking, the different ways of working. As you say, there are times when I've got to be very cautious in terms of making sure, talking to a student one-to-one. I've got to be very, how do I do that? Making sure that you have all the kind of safety things of glass indoors and doors open when you're talking to students, and just make sure that you're just hyper aware of all those kind of safeguarding issues. I have to say I love working at a girls' school. It is a mixed sixth form,
Okay.
so there are a number of boys in the sixth form. So it's not a girls' school through and through, although the name is Dover Grammar School for Girls. But it is something to think about, and I think particularly the role model is the one that really I had to think about really hard before becoming a head at a girls' school. That actually the students really do take role models from their teachers, from their support staff, from the leaders in school. And so that's one I probably had to think through most carefully.
I suppose there's real value in your place there, being a role model for a strong male who supports and amplifies the voices of women. So you having that recognition that actually, yes, it's very important that many of your senior leadership may be female if they're the best people for the job, but that there's that important element of seeing what a male leader can do and how he can support others, because we don't want to have that divide. So I think it must be very multifaceted.
And I think I've become more of a champion for women and girls as I've gone on. As you see some disadvantage that's unfair or some inequality or something nationally, you just become so much more sensitive to it. And I think that really has changed a lot of my perception and the way that I will talk about girls' schools and students. There's certain things that obviously you don't particularly want to go into when you see that inequality and you just think that's not right. I wouldn't have seen that had I not worked for a girls' school. I'm not working in a girls' school. Because you take on that feeling, don't you?
Really important to have that awareness, I guess. So you did kind of mention the idea of disadvantage there when you talked about it, and I know before we started recording you were really keen to share something that you're passionate about around supporting children and young people who are a receipt of Pupil Premium. And I know that's something that for so many schools is a real challenge, around thinking about what we can do better, because we're talking about a broad spectrum we're talking about people. We can't pigeonhole what will work for one child or school, and also the finances, because certainly nationally we're in really challenging time for finances. So that I've certainly seen as a head Pupil Premium funding and the expectation for that really have to change over time, where it felt like very much an additional, wow, we can really go places with this, to 10 years later, actually we're going to have to be far more creative with this because other pots of our budget are not there. So I don't know if that's something you've found, but it would be really great to hear your perspective, I guess, on that and the things that you are passionate about and have done.
Probably the thing I'm most proud of in terms of headship is the way that we've worked with students in receipt of Pupil Premium. So those would be the very low income families. If you start doing the numbers, very low income students from low income families. I think in terms of a whole strategy, I had to get my mind around it and to understand, if you like, the journey of a student from very low income families, from the lack of opportunities they may get, or just to see that journey all the way through, and then to recognize that students who were coming into school in receipt of Pupil Premium may also be behind where they should be nationally, that fits into the statistics. So that what we want to do in the school is to see them making as much, if not more, progress than other students. And that obviously is really, really important. But also you've got to then kind of, take it apart. What are the opportunities? What creates that idea of social mobility? Looking at things like cultural capital. What opportunities can we provide, as you say, given the shrinking budgets, what opportunities can we provide that make the difference? What can we provide for students who maybe haven't travelled very far? What are those standard opportunities we can provide, maybe not being abroad? What can we provide for students who maybe need a mentor to understand the sixth form? What is sixth form? If nobody in your family's been in a sixth form in a school before, why would you do it? Why would you want to do it? If nobody in your family's ever been to university before, done a degree, why would you want to do that? What's the opportunities? Why shouldn't I just not? So it's that whole understanding, and then helping staff, but also creating that culture where staff want to mentor students and take notice of them and identify them and support them in that way. I was very pleased in the last year with our kind of progress measures. We were almost, the students received Pupil Premium, the disadvantaged students were almost at the same as the broader student body. And next year, if all goes to plan as we think it's going to, that progress will be better. So that's, if you like, in terms of headship, that's something that I will take away and be very, very pleased with in terms of my headship. Yeah.
And so is that a strategy you've used, mentoring, staff mentoring individuals or groups?
Yes, staff mentoring individuals. So we've got a member of staff who's a Pupil Premium champion. That's a teaching member of staff who does a lot of the data and the work with that. And we also have a teaching assistant who's a Pupil Premium teaching assistant, but works to mentor those students, contacts their families, and kind of draws that whole thing together. And then obviously other individuals are supported in individual way that we would see necessary. So if a student needs, I don't know, particular help with organisation, or they need a bit more support careers wise, we can then put that in.
And I guess it's being able to be bespoke and strategic with that. So mapping out actually what is going to make the difference for it. Because in an ideal world, you would be very individual about each different young person, that's what they are, without being able to actually, we'll do this one trip that will support all of them, because as you said, there will be different challenges that you can support them to take that next step. So yeah, a bespoke approach is always going to work really well. I guess it's just being able to do that with staffing, with finances, with capacity, I guess just in time to take that time to know that individual, know their family, navigate how that how that works for them. That is absolutely something to be really proud of, because that's making such an incredible difference. I guess you will have seen in your times ahead the difference between when you aren't able to make those decisions for young adults, and then when you can, and what they're able to
and seeing students go on from here to really hugely aspirational universities, some going on to Oxbridge, who have been supported in that way through the school. It does give that real sense of, yes, actually we're making a difference. We genuinely are making a difference to those students and their lives in quite a significant way.
Amazing. So I would also love to know a little bit about what's next for Bob Benson, head teacher, because again, pre-recording you had shared with me something exciting that's kind of on the horizon. So what are your next plans, having been head teacher for a very good amount of time?
Well, that's a great question, and one I might push back to you actually for a bit of advice talking about it. But yes, I've done 7.5 years here at the amazing Dover Grammar School for Girls, and just really began to feel it's time to move on to do something different. Somebody very wise once said to me, Bob, do 7 years, but no longer as a head. And I suppose in a secondary school, you've seen one group of students all the way through, so it kind of makes sense. And I'm really beginning to think, certainly with some of the work I'm done with Askell, that there's a huge need out there to support school leaders in a time which is really challenging. So yes, I made the decision to step down. In fact, it's only today that they're doing part of the recruitment for my replacement. So it's a funny day for me in school. But yes, so I'm looking to move towards that kind of consultancy role, which I know, Emma, you've done over the last year, looking into some executive coaching and really what can be done to support leaders. You know, there are some challenges at the moment, aren't there, for school leaders? There are times when school leaders get to the place when the challenges kind of step up on one by one. And I want to be at that place where I can be somebody that actually can come in and support them, whether that's in a coaching way, whether that's in, do you know what, I'll just sit down with you. We'll talk through these things. If you've got a difficult meeting, why don't I just step in and be in that difficult meeting? So you have somebody that's a mentor, a buddy, you know, somebody who is there. Because actually, you know, so often as school leaders, we get really focused on, we've got this really, the thing that we're really concerned about at the moment. And then a year later, do you know, I can't remember what it was a year ago. I really can't remember. And yes, they are really important. And yes, they are, you know, trying to do the very best for students. Or navigating a difficult staffing or parent issue. But actually they do move on. And that's one of the nice things about schools, doesn't it? Life does move on. And it is very difficult a year later to think about it. So giving that sense of perspective and support. Yeah. Quite how that works out, I'm not sure. But that's where hopefully you can give me a little bit of information about how you've moved from headship into consultancy and the support that you do for school leaders.
Yeah. And I think what I really liked there is you had, you know, somebody who you clearly respected giving you some advice about a reasonable amount of time to do the job for, I think. And I literally, somebody posted something on LinkedIn this morning and I commented on it about the idea of being able to still lead and being able to still work with educators in a leadership role that doesn't necessarily sit in a school in that way. So I think, and whether this is my perception, definitely from speaking to others, they felt the same, that the career of leadership in schools is kind of, you step up that ladder, you get to headship, you're at the pinnacle, you stay there forever, and then you retire. There's, you know, this sort of expectation. Sometimes our careers are, that's what you do. And I think, you know, most of my friends are colleagues and work in education, but I do have a few who are in corporate. And actually, it's really normal to go into different sectors and different jobs. And yeah, every 5 years, you might, 7 years, whatever it is, step into it. That's very normalized and healthy. But I don't think that is the same in education. I think it's seen different. If you're making a decision to step out of headship, I personally have shared really openly my feelings of failure. I felt that I had failed by making that decision, and everyone was saying, you're so brave, you haven't failed at all, you know, you're doing what's right for you. But because I guess because deep down I wanted to be a head teacher, people said, what are you going to do? And I said, I don't know, I wanted to be a head teacher, but right now that job isn't the job I can or want to be doing right now. So that was it was navigating all of that. But I think having spoken to lots of people by doing this journey for the podcast and networking with other people, there's a really positive mindset that do a stint of time in headship or CEO or senior leader, whatever it is, brilliant, and offer and influence others, great. Then it's absolutely a great decision to go and do something different. That's a really positive move. And that's really helped me, I think, to just reflect on, you know, the value that it's okay and positive to do, to, you know, to make those decisions. And I will not lie that it is absolutely terrifying, mainly from a financial standpoint, because you go from the security of being a head teacher with a reasonable salary. I mean, with the weight that we bear, it could be better. But that is really, really scary, stepping out and saying, you know, if you're going from one job to another, that's different. If you're going to say, I'm going to work for myself, then that bit's terrifying. So I'm always completely honest about that bit. But I think what's really important, which what you've shared, is finding the bit you are passionate about. And will light you up in the work that you are going to be doing. Because ultimately you get to pick the next bit. You get to choose what that is within reason. It needs to be something that people will want and need. But what I've certainly found is that by being able to work in a way on the things that I enjoy, I am knowledgeable about, that light me up, I can bring my best self to it, which is kind of cyclical and it works. So yeah, it is a really interesting time. And there's a lot of people out there making this decision right now, which is, I think, really positive for everyone who's given a lot of time to school leadership and is making a decision to step out. Yeah. It's also really sad when that decision maybe would be different if the sector was different.
Yes.
For me, I felt like my decision to step out maybe could have been different, and maybe I could have stayed longer had we been in a different situation. So yeah, it's kind of a tale of two halves, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's an interesting, because this is definitely a decision rather than stepping out. I think this is the right time for me to do that. Who knows, might be influenced by having my first granddaughter. That makes a bit of a difference, doesn't it? But it's a definite. But there must be, I've been in education for 31 years, and we must have an education system where you can be a great school leader, head teacher, CEO, but also a good spouse, a great mother, a great father, a great granddad, a great son. Do you know what I mean? It can't be mutually exclusive, and we have to get to a stage where there is that support that's needed. There is that system where people can flourish as a person and be a great head.
Yeah.
And
there are many people.
I can either do this or I can do that. Yeah. If I do this is what I will sacrifice and I will lose. And there's got to be a way in which, the education can get to a stage that we are closer and closer to that. Of course, it will be a tough job. It's always going to be days when you think, right, there is nothing else I've got to do today. There is, the flood. I've got to focus on that. Nothing else. Okay, that's fine. But generally, we've got to be able to get closer and closer. And in your situation as well, there's got to be a way in which, great leaders like yourself, who want to be can be in that position in a great school and can do there for the very best of the students and young people we work with.
Yeah. And I think how you described the sort of support that you would want to offer really resonates with me. That's exactly what I needed. And I was incredibly lucky that I had a great coach, lots of support. So it wasn't that those things weren't there, there's lots of other complexities, but that's what I felt. Things went well when I had someone, like you said, almost next to me, sitting alongside me on the end of the phone, just to be there sometimes, I'll do it for you, or, oh, you're not coping, so I'll send an expert in. A partner. I think I see really amazing people feeling like they're doing the job when they do a co-headship. I think there's something in that recognition of a partnership, because, okay, you've got your senior leadership team. Great. That's a team, that's partnership. But often there is one head or one CEO. And actually, I think there's really something in exploring more, and doing a bit more around co-headships, because there are some great co-headships out there, and that's definitely becoming a more common theme. And maybe where there aren't co-headships, there's a head who has got a bob alongside or something like that, because that's what I think would make a real difference.
You've got governors, you've got a fantastic group of governors. They're very supportive. My leadership team are just amazing. They've been so, supportive of those, ups and downs of life you have in headship. That's great. But actually, there is sometimes when you need, as you said, that alongside, reliable, gosh, you've done this. You've been there, you understand. You're not going to be looking down on me because you think I'm failing. You're going to say, well, when I did it, I got it, and it was a lot worse for me, and to be that support is just so important. Yeah, for me, it's just the challenge of how do I get from here to there? But anyway, who knows?
You will get there. And the other thing you touched on there, I think is interesting, is where we've got sort of multi-academy trusts or growing links with schools. I certainly found there was things that were labelled as support, but they weren't really support. They were more accountability, and they were more pressure. And even if you were being told, oh, this person's coming in to look at your phonics, and they're going to support you with it, it still was someone coming in to watch, to judge, and to give you some actions. And as they could have done that in the kindest way, but the way a lot of that relationship with school improvement is set up at the moment is that it is expert coming in, judging, giving actions, even if you're working alongside, and then they kind of go away again. And what I've been really keen to shift is that I'd love to come in and be seen as somebody who can support in an expert way, but that it's much more two-way. And actually, I'll do some of the work with you. I will literally sit down and help you with that action plan, or I will, I'll do some people interviews for you so that you don't have, I want to almost be like an extra, like a bit of a co-head or someone who sits alongside. I think there's real value in that, because and that definitely with the multi-academy trust system, you get more school improvement support. But I think if we're really honest, it doesn't always feel like support. It feels like more pressure.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think I've done a bit of work with the multi-academy trust and talked to one or two others, and where it works well, it does seem that support takes a lot of pressure off.
Yeah.
Even in terms of just slightly different structure for, I don't know, for complaints or for GDPR or whatever.
Yes.
There is a lot that can be taken off. Obviously, many heads are absolutely loving what they do at the moment, but many of those who work in really good multi-academy trusts are also really positive about it, because it does feel at times that you've got that person alongside. I'm not saying that's every trust, and I'm not saying it's everyone, and obviously we're not part of a trust, so I don't have that experience. But I do remember, do you remember the whole GDPR thing, when everybody suddenly had to produce GDPR policies? You had to have somebody supporting you. I remember talking to a local head and saying, gosh, what are we going to do? And everybody else, and one of them saying, oh, it's okay, the trust is taking charge of that.
Yeah. And
they just did. They took charge of it. Everything was sorted. It was like it was a portion of the head teacher's job that just disappeared.
Yeah, and my headships have always been as part of multi-academy trust. So I'm a big fan. And I think you're right, where the support is absolutely invaluable is some of the HR, the business side, some of the economies of scale that you can get with, tech support or IT management or data. There's a huge amount there that does absolutely take off sections of a head teacher's role that I think is really supportive. It's been amazing to speak to you, Bob. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks for having me on, Emma. And
you're
well done.
Welcome.
Brilliant. Well done.
Thank you. It's been fab. Right. Have a lovely day. We will say goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for listening to the Stories of School Leadership podcast. We'd love to know what inspired you in this episode, so do get in touch and tell us your thoughts. And please share this with friends and colleagues. If you have time, a review would mean so much. It really helps us to reach more people. If you'd like to connect with me to follow my journey or access some support, maybe supervision, coaching or early years consultancy, you can find me at Stories of School Leadership on Instagram. I'm Emma Lurie on LinkedIn, or my website is emmalurie.co.uk. I hope you have a great day whatever you're getting up to next, and I can't wait to share the next episode with you.